The encounter with the invisible enemy. Summer 1941. Eastern Front. July 22, 1941. The golden fields of Ukraine stretched endlessly beneath the burning sun, heavy with dust, and the scent of oil and scorched metal. The 4th Panzer Group advanced with unshakable confidence. Their Panzer III and IV tanks had crushed every foe they met, until now, at the head of one armored column rode Hauptmann Karl Weiss, a veteran of France and the Balkans, his uniform coated in grime and sweat. From his hatch, he scanned the horizon through his binoculars. The German offensive against the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, had seemed unstoppable. The Red Army had collapsed in city after city. The roads eastward lay open. Then came the thunder. A sharp crack echoed across the plains, followed by a deafening explosion that sent a shockwave through the earth. The tank ahead of Weiss burst into flame, hit by something unseen. Panic erupted over the radio. Panzer 1112 destroyed. Unknown weapon. Repeat, unknown tank in the area. Weiss turned, scanning the smoke, and then he saw it. A shape emerged through the haze, low, angular. Its armor sloped like the face of a blade. It moved faster than any tank he had ever seen, gliding effortlessly over the muddy ground. The next shot came from that direction. Another flash, another German tank torn apart. That day, the Wehrmacht met the T-34 for the first time. Reports flooded headquarters within days. The new Soviet tank defied every assumption of German engineering. Its angled armor made shells glance off harmlessly. Its 76.2mm F-34 gun punched straight through the frontal plates of Panzer III and IV tanks. But what terrified the Germans most was its mobility. The T-34 tore across swamps, snow and deep mud where German tanks bogged down helplessly. The secret was its wide tracks and a diesel V2 engine, lighter and far less flammable than the gasoline engines the Germans relied on. At first, Berlin refused to believe it. "This is Soviet propaganda," scoffed a colonel at the armament office. "They lack the industry to build such machines." But the evidence kept arriving: photographs, destroyed tank fragments, even a captured T-34 dragged back for study. When engineers dismantled it, disbelief turned to alarm. The tank was both simple and ingenious, rugged, easy to manufacture, and built for the brutal conditions of the Eastern Front. It was everything German engineering was not. On the front lines, soldiers paid the price. Weiss recorded in his diary that night, "Our shells bounce off its hide like stones. It strikes, vanishes, then strikes again. Even our Stukas can't stop it. We're fighting a ghost made of steel." The Soviets were learning too. At first, their crews were poorly trained, often charging without coordination. But with each skirmish, they grew deadlier. The T-34's design allowed them to fight on their own terms, hit fast, disappear, and let the terrain do the rest. By September 1941, near Smolensk, a company of T-34s ambushed an entire German division, annihilating it in minutes. The advance slowed for the first time since the invasion began. On Hitler's maps, the red line marking the front once moving east like wildfire began to buckle. Tiny annotations appeared in the margins. T-34 sighted. The myth of German invincibility had met its first true rival. Engineering shock. Inside the Beast of Steel. October 1941. Deep within a German testing facility near Kummersdorf, a captured T-34 sat under harsh white lights, its armor streaked with mud and soot from the front. Around it gathered a small group of German engineers, officers and analysts, men who had designed the famed panzer divisions that once seemed unstoppable. They circled the Soviet machine in silence. Its sloped armor reflected the light like a knife's edge, and the heavy scent of diesel still lingered from the engine bay. Major General Heinz Guderian himself, the father of German armored warfare, leaned forward and tapped the hull with his gloved hand. "Simple," he murmured, "and brilliant." One engineer whispered, "They've built this like a tractor, not a luxury car." Guderian nodded grimly. "That's exactly why it works." The German design philosophy prized precision, complex optics, intricate gearboxes, finely machined armor plates. But the T-34 had none of that refinement. Its welds were rough, its parts crude, yet it could be built in days instead of months, repaired in the field with minimal tools, and most importantly, it worked in any condition. The engineers ran tests. They fired 50mm rounds from a Panzer III at close range. Each shot sparked, ricocheted, and left only dents. The T-34's 45-degree angled hull turned direct hits into glancing blows. Its diesel engine produced less heat, reducing visibility to enemy aircraft. Its wide tracks gave it superior traction over mud and snow, terrain that had already begun to cripple the German advance. Guderian ordered a full report sent to Berlin. "We underestimated them," he wrote. "Our armored forces are facing a weapon that outclasses us in nearly every way that matters." When the findings reached Hitler's desk, he was furious. He summoned his engineers and demanded an immediate countermeasure. "Build me a tank that no one can destroy," he roared. Thus began the desperate race to develop the Panther and the Tiger, machines that would consume resources, time and manpower Germany could scarcely afford. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the effects of the T-34 were catastrophic. Entire panzer battalions found themselves bogged down in autumn mud, unable to move or fight effectively. Soviet counterattacks, supported by these nimble tanks, turned the tide in local battle. In one skirmish near Mtsensk, the German 4th Panzer Division advanced confidently, expecting scattered resistance. Instead, a regiment of T-34s ambushed them from concealed positions along the tree line. The Soviet commander, Dmitry Lavrenenko, one of the most skilled tank aces of the war, moved with precision and patience. His platoon fired from multiple angles, striking panzers one by one before disappearing behind ridges. Within hours, 43 German tanks lay disabled or burning. Lavrenenko had destroyed 16 himself, a record that stunned both sides. The Germans radioed in confusion and disbelief. "They're everywhere," one operator reported, "and our shells do nothing." What the Wehrmacht had assumed would be a swift conquest had turned into a nightmare of attrition. The T-34 became not just a machine, but a symbol of Soviet resilience, forged in steel, built by factories relocated thousands of kilometers east, and operated by men and women who refused to yield. In Moscow, Stalin's advisors presented him with the latest reports. For the first time since June, the lines on the map weren't moving backward. The T-34 wasn't merely a weapon. It was hope made mechanical. Production doubled, then tripled. By winter, new factories in the Urals were rolling out dozens every day, each simpler, cheaper, and deadlier than the last. By the time the snow began to fall, the Germans realized a grim truth. They had marched into a war they could not build their way out of. The machine they once dismissed as primitive was rewriting the very laws of armored warfare, and the myth of German technological superiority was dying beneath the treads of a Soviet tank. Winter's iron teeth. The turning tide of 1941, 1942. December 5, 1941. The Russian winter had finally arrived, a white, merciless expanse stretching across the Eastern Front. Temperatures dropped below -30°C. Oil froze inside engines. Rifle bolts refused to move. Men wrapped themselves in anything they could find. Curtains, newspapers, even horse blankets, but not the T-34. In the outskirts of Moscow, Sergeant Ivan Smirnov sat inside his tank, breath fogging in the bitter cold. He ran a gloved hand across the rough steel surface of the controls. Simple levers, rugged gears, no unnecessary precision. The diesel engine purred steadily behind him. He knew what the Germans didn't. The T-34 was built for this hell, Outside, German panzers groaned and stalled. Their engines, designed for temperate climates, froze solid. Crews huddled around fires, helpless, while the Soviet tanks rolled forward through snowdrifts, as if the earth itself had chosen sides. At dawn, the Red Army counteroffensive began. Hundreds of T-34s advanced from the forest line, engines roaring like beasts. The snow exploded beneath their tracks. From the air they looked like a tide of moving shadows, swallowing the white. German Captain Karl Weiss, the same officer who had first encountered the T-34 months earlier, now stood entrenched near Klin, watching the horizon. "Not again," he muttered, tightening his gloves. His men were exhausted, frostbitten, and low on ammunition. When the first Soviet shells fell, the sound was like thunder rolling over ice. The battle that followed was chaos. Panzers fired desperately, their shells bouncing off Soviet armor. The T-34s kept coming, unbothered by terrain or temperature. Weiss ordered his men to retreat to higher ground, but it was too late. The Soviet line surged forward, and within hours, the Germans were in full withdrawal. That same week, word spread through the German ranks: "The Russians have endless tanks." It wasn't true, not yet, but the myth itself broke morale. The Wehrmacht, which had believed in swift, decisive victories, was now stuck in an endless grind against machines that refused to die and soldiers that refused to surrender. Behind those machines was something more powerful than engineering: the Soviet will to endure. Thousands of factory workers, many of them women, worked through nights in the frozen cities of the Urals, welding and assembling tanks under candlelight. They built them faster than Germany could destroy them. Each T-34 that rolled off the line was a message written in steel: "You will not break us." Inside the Kremlin, Stalin received the first reports of the German retreat from Moscow. He leaned over the map, tracing the movement of his armored divisions with a trembling finger. "Let them freeze," he said coldly. "The T-34 will chase them home." By the spring of 1942, the legend of the T-34 had spread across both sides of the front. To the Germans, it was a specter that haunted their every move. To the Soviets, it was a savior, a machine born from the soil of their suffering. German intelligence even issued pamphlets warning tank crews: avoid direct engagement with T-30. It was the first official admission that the myth of Nazi invincibility had shattered. The war of blitzkrieg, fast, decisive, and mechanical, had turned into a war of endurance. And in that new kind of war, the T-34 was king. In the months that followed, the tank would spearhead counterattacks at Kharkov, Stalingrad, and Kursk, battles that would grind the Wehrmacht into dust. The Germans would respond with the Panther and the Tiger, magnificent machines of steel and fear, but they were complex, fragile and few. The T-34, crude but eternal, would roll on in tens of thousands. A machine born of necessity had become the weapon of destiny. The Empire of Steel, 1943, and the road to Kursk, June 1943. The summer sun beat down on the endless fields of western Russia. Wheat swayed gently in the wind, quiet, peaceful, until the rumble of engines shattered the calm. From horizon to horizon, the largest armored force in history was gathering. Over 3,000 German tanks, the new Tigers and Panthers, gleaming in their fresh camouflage, faced nearly 5,000 Soviet tanks, most of them T-34s. Both sides knew this would not be a battle for land, but for supremacy itself. The world would remember this place as Kursk. Inside his command post, General Erich von Manstein studied the maps with the precision of a surgeon. "This is where we reclaim the East," he told his officers. "We will cut through their line like a blade." But outside, the Soviets had already prepared for him. Miles of trenches, barbed wire and minefields, and waiting behind them, row upon row of T-34's engines idling, guns aimed, At dawn on July 5, the sky erupted. Artillery thunder rolled across the steppe. German formations advanced, the Tigers and Panthers leading the charge. Their massive 88mm guns tore through Soviet defenses with terrifying accuracy. For a moment, it seemed as if the Germans might break through. But then the counterattack came. From the tree line and ridges, waves of T-34s surged forward. They weren't the same machines the Germans had first met in 1941. These were faster, better armed, and commanded by veterans who had survived 2 years of brutal war. Soviet tankers maneuvered in groups, attacking from multiple angles, striking the weaker flanks of the German beasts. A Tiger tank, powerful but slow, struggled to turn its turret. 2 T-34s flanked it at once, one drawing fire, the other firing into its rear armor. The explosion lit up the morning sky. Sergeant Smirnov, now a platoon commander, shouted over the roar of his engine, "Aim for the sides. Keep moving." His unit darted between smoke and wreckage, firing, reversing, attacking again. Around him the battle became a storm of metal and fire, hundreds of tanks colliding in the dust. This was Prokhorovka, the heart of the Kursk offensive, the largest tank battle the world would ever see. When the smoke cleared days later, the fields were littered with burning hulks, German and Soviet alike. But the difference lay not in the wreckage, but in what remained. The Soviet lines held. The T-34s, though bloodied, still moved forward. The vaunted German offensive had failed. From Berlin to Moscow, the meaning was clear. The Wehrmacht's last hope of victory in the east had died at Kursk. In the aftermath, production of the T-34 accelerated beyond imagination. Soviet factories rolled out 1,000 ETA tanks a month, many of them the upgraded T-34-85, fitted with a larger gun capable of matching even the Tiger's armor. In Germany, the situation was the opposite. Each Tiger tank required over 300,000 man-hours to build, a mechanical masterpiece that was too perfect for the chaos of total war. The T-34, built in a fraction of the time, rolled off assembly lines like wheat from a harvest. For every Tiger destroyed, 5 more T-34s took its place. Even captured German soldiers began to speak of it with a strange reverence. One prisoner reportedly said, "When you see that green shape in the snow, you don't think of a machine, you think of death itself." By 1944, as the Red Army pushed westward, the T-34 became the iron spearhead of liberation, rolling through Poland, Belarus, and into the heart of Europe. Cities burned, empires fell, and the same tank that had once defended Moscow now carried victory banners through Berlin. It was not the most advanced tank of the war, not the fastest, nor the heaviest, but it was the most balanced, the most adaptable, and perhaps most importantly, the most human. Designed by necessity, born from desperation, it embodied the will of an entire nation to survive, and in the end, that will proved indestructible. When the Red Army entered Berlin in April 1945, the streets echoed once more with the deep growl of diesel engines. The T-34s rolled between the ruins of the Reichstag, the same machines the Germans had once mocked as primitive. The myth of Nazi invincibility had been crushed beneath their tracks. The tank the Germans laughed at had rolled all the way to their doorstep.